UFC 263 is headlined by a middleweight championship fight between challenger Marvin Vettori and the reigning champion Israel Adesanya. Now, this is a rematch. We've seen the two men in the octagon before. It was a while ago, but it was a pretty competitive fight. In fact, Izzy only won by a split decision, according to the judges, although I know a lot of other people feel a little bit differently. But Drake, it's been a minute for both guys. Both guys have definitely grown, shown a lot of improvements. How do you see the fight going, and who do you got in this one?
Man, oh man, this one here, Marvin Vettori, Adesanya, not the fight that we should be getting, in my opinion, just yet. Would have loved to see Robert in there again with Adesanya.
Justice for Bobby Knuckles, yes,
justice
sir.
for Bobby.
Yes.
But
here.
The time will come for Bobby Nux. Instead, we got the Italian Dream coming in here for his shot, which, I always do love to see lengthy winning streaks rewarded. So at least it's not Darren Till. I will say that much. It could be a lot worse. Be a lot worse. And a rematch too, which I do like that prospect, especially for a guy like Adesanya, who in MMA, this will be his very first rematch. Yeah, looking at his record, make sure that not missing anybody. Obviously, he's only lost to Jan Blachowicz in his very last fight at light heavyweights. So when you look at this one, both of these guys, you said fight was a while ago, but as you pointed out to me last time we talked about this, Pat, it's actually a lot more recent than people will remember because, both guys, maybe Adesanya more so in particular, has had a lot of fights since then. I mean, if we're to count them, geez, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. He's had 8 whole fights since that April of 2018 encounter with Vettori, whereas Vettori's entire winning streak has happened since then. The 5 in a row, which 5 to 8, 3-fight difference is a pretty big difference in MMA. And, you look at both guys were obviously younger into their careers. Obviously, Adesanya has had an entire kickboxing career up until then. But Vettori at that time, still pretty prospecty. I wasn't at all sold on him really doing anything in the division at that time. Like, I just thought he was going to be one of those guys who he'll win some, lose some. He's not going to be the worst guy, but just very middle of the pack. And then in that fight, went out there and did a lot better than obviously a lot of people thought he would. I didn't think he won the fight, but he was competitive and had his moments for sure. That is undeniable. And you look at since then, right? I think it's fair to say that he's probably improved more because, as I said, he wasn't that impressive at that time to me. Just looked like a pretty average guy. Since then, though, has looked very, very good in all areas and very maybe underestimated in his grappling because people know him as this big, aggressive Italian dude. So like maybe they think of him more as a striker, but when you actually look at his performances, very strong on the ground. He gets down just about everybody these days and was able to dominate Kevin Holland in that last fight. Yes, short notice. Jack Hermanson, though, which was an absolute banger all over the place that fight went. He's very tough and durable, which is something that I think is going to be important for Adesanya, who, yes, Adesanya has improved as well since their first fight. But just when you look at overall, yes, Adesanya did lose this last fight to Blachowicz, which I think since it was light heavyweight, it's something people aren't quite considering for this fight, which I think is fair. But at the same time, we did see a weakness, a very clear weakness be exploited in Adesanya's, not his favor, but and Vettori even pointed out, like, if you look at when Adesanya has been good at defending takedowns, it's against the cage, whereas Blachowicz exploited that brilliantly, taking him down in the middle of the octagon, and was pretty much stuck there after getting taken down. And yes, Blachowicz bigger, but Vettori, in terms of the grapplers at 185. He's obviously up there now. I think he's proven that at this point and had success against Adesanya the first time. If you're going to go off of them both improving since then, I don't really think there's any reason to not believe that he shouldn't be able to do this again, especially after having been in there with him once already. So they know each other a little bit, which I think helps them a bit in both ways what to expect. But I think Vettori more so. And I think that this fight is one where he's being overlooked a little bit underestimated. Um, maybe because of the Whitaker should be getting the title fight thing. That's probably the big one for me. Why people are like, Vettori's just going to get worked.
Strength
Which
of competition too, a little
Yes.
bit. But
Yes. And it very well could happen because if you do look back at that Kevin Holland fight when Kevin was a lot more serious than the Brunson fight, he actually was landing pretty well. And I believe even wobbled Vettori a little bit there, which is quite concerning going into an Adesanya matchup, rematch. But you have to think his preparation will be on point, and could have just been him getting a little antsy going in there with a short notice fight, that kind of thing. But give him the benefit of the doubt. Kind of have to give both of them the benefit of the doubts in their last fights, each respectively. So, man, when it comes down to how it'll kind of unfold and prediction wise, as much as I want to give Vettori all this credit, and I think it is deserved, it's hard for me still to go against Adesanya since he beat him already the first time. I think he will know what to expect because Vittori's kind of putting it out there. He's laying out how, all right, I know that if you get him down in the middle of the cage, then it's good for me. And Adesanya, I think he's obviously not a stupid guy. So I think this should be a fight that he will dictate. The range is something he's going to need to do. Not let Vettori get in tight on him, whether it's in the clinch against the cage or, blasting in with those takedowns, whatever it may be, get his power shots in. So I think he's going to be a little bit bull and matador in this one, which kind of, if I'm remembering correctly, the first fight was a little bit like that. Just maybe a bit more patient from Vettori when he's coming in, but I think he'll try to maybe initiate a bit more. So it's going to be most interesting how this fight plays out in the latter half with the 2 extra rounds, which, as I'm sure you'll mention, Pat, and I will leave it for you, that third round was something to behold when looking at this matchup. But ultimately, man, I'm going to go with Adesanya unanimous decision. I could see him getting a knockout or a TKO later on, but I don't know. I believe in Vettori being able to close the distance, and I think he is going to get him to the ground, whether it's against the cage or in the middle of it. He is going to have successful moments similar to that first fight. But it's just if he can capitalize to the fullest effect, which I don't know. He's not much of a finisher, right? He does have finishes, and more so by submission than we realize. As I said, people think of him as a striker more over his grappling abilities, but I think it would be important for him to be real aggressive with submissions, or that guy. Like if he had Jacare's skill set, he's gold then. But he doesn't. So I got to go with Ant still. I gotta.
Yeah, and it's it's one of those things where I watched that first fight a couple of times, and I've watched where both guys have come, and I it's important to point out a couple of things that you did in terms of this isn't years upon years of a rematch. This isn't the McGregor versus Poirier rematch where there was a lot of time in between. This this was a situation of 3 years, around 3 years or so, and Vettori has grown more than Adesanya. Adesanya always had that crazy striking background. He's refined it more for MMA. He's, become more technical, which has made him just a sniper and an assassin for knocking people out. But as we saw in the Jan match, Jan did outstrike Adesanya. A lot of people have trouble, looking at that. And I know in real time, I'm not going to bring that up, but people still to this day say, no, Adesanya clearly outstruck him. But if you go back and you count the strikes, Jan did outstrike him. And the interesting thing about watching the Vettori Adesanya matchup, the first one, was that Vettori landed some good shots on the feet. At one point, he eats a couple of good shots from Adesanya, shakes him off, and lands a big overhand left that gets Adesanya retreating. And he went for 6 takedowns. He only got 2 of them. But the third round, as you pointed out, is the real key there, where that was the round that Vettori clearly won, and he had finally gotten Adesanya down in the middle, or at least away from the cage enough that Adesanya could not get back up. And we've seen that as recently with Jan. And it wasn't, you can say it was weight and all that stuff, but honestly, I don't think it was weight that was keeping Adesanya on the ground in the Jan matchup, right? He wasn't really scrambling too much. He was trying to, keep himself safe, but he didn't really make any clear attempts to get up and do what you needed to do to get up. And that's something Vettori is going to exploit. The Holland matchup was important for Vettori, because as you mentioned, also, Vettori seemed to have gotten a little bit wobbled there, but I'm not sure if that was really him being hurt or if it was fatigue or a combination, because he did attempt 17 takedowns. He made 11 of them, but like, that's insane.
Yeah.
Those numbers are just bonkers. And he got 11 takedowns and again, dominated Holland once he got him down. I think Vettori is going to be smarter this time around, because especially in the first Adesanya fight, he stood and traded with Adesanya quite a bit. And I think he'll do that a little bit, but the way he fought Holland gives me confidence that Vettori will really just use his striking only to set up the takedowns and to get Adesanya down. And as you mentioned, Jan was bigger and Vettori is smaller than Jan, right? But when Vettori got Izzy down in that round 3 of their first fight, Izzy couldn't get up really. It was very hard for him to get up when he was down, more so away from the fence. So I've always wanted to see Adesanya against an actual wrestler. I don't consider Brunson, that was Wild Brunson, an actual wrestler with those lazy single leg attempts that were just awful. Yoel Romero is an infuriating case that will drive me nuts, because had that man, I think he went for 3 takedowns. I think if he had really just focused on the wrestling, I'm pretty sure he could have won that fight, and that's on him. But with Vettori, as long as his chin holds up, I think he wins this. I think his grappling game will be the answer, because that's Adesanya's glaring weakness. It always has been. Rob Wilkinson took Adesanya down 3 times, right? That's important to remember. And then who was it that fought him before Vettori as well?
Tavares? No, it was
Tavares. Wilkinson. Tavares got him down as well. Yeah, like that shows you a weakness, and the Jan fight showed that he still hasn't fixed that problem. Is that if you get Izzy down, he has nothing that he can do to get up. He can't scramble effectively to get out of that in the middle of the cage. If he has the fence, he can utilize that with his longer body to get up, and he's good at that. But if he's out in the center of the octagon or away from the fence at all, he's kind of just stuck there. And that's all Vettori has to do, is just take him down in the middle of the octagon, or at least a foot away from the fence, and he's got that round. He pretty much knows it too. So despite the fact that I think Adesanya will piece Vettori up on the feet mostly, I do believe Vettori's chin is still there, and I believe his defense and his grappling is good enough that this will be the downfall of Adesanya. I think we will see a new champion. I'm not going to say it like super confidently or say, we've got a 100% guarantee, but I am confident enough in Vettori's chin that I'm going to go Vettori here. Because if his chin doesn't hold up, then right. it's over. I agree. Right? That's it. But if his chin holds the way it's held, and he ate some shots from Holland.
Yeah.
And he ate some shots from Adesanya the first time around. I think that, I think it's just going to be a clinch game and a takedown game. And I think as the fight goes on, Izzy will also get more and more tired. It's much, much harder to defend those takedowns and fight off your back with some guy on top of you if he gets the takedown than it is, to keep just getting the person down. And the fact that Vettori went for 17 takedowns against Holland shows, yes, he was tired by the end. Who the hell wouldn't be? But, he did it. He did what he had to do. So
that was the thing too about that fight, is that going in on short notice, obviously we were a little bit concerned about, oh, this is a matchup where he might get too emotional, because we know Kevin Holland, and even with Kevin Holland not being very talkative in that fight, it was still like, this guy, and that we know that Vettori is a little bit of a hothead, admittedly, as I mentioned earlier. So that was a concern, and see if he can. The fact that he was able to get through it just fine and still stick to a smart game plan shows that he should be able to do the same against Adesanya in a rematch, control his emotions, at least you would think, and he definitely should hope to do that. But I also wanted to point out too how it's so interesting, dude, how we see this weakness in Adesanya's game and the struggle he has had in these certain situations on the ground, where, and you mentioned he hasn't fought a wrestler, but the one wrestler that you could define as a wrestler he did fight, and Kelvin, was actually the one who had the least amount of success on the ground. You remember that late scramble and like triangle armbar that Adesanya was throwing up. And of course, this was at the end of a war, but like, still, it's like, where is that coming from? And we've never seen it since, or before. Just very bizarre.
Yeah, it's one of those situations where, I mean, and that's why it's been so infuriating for me, because so many wrestlers and good wrestlers tend to learn how to strike. They get a couple knockouts. They're using, even Habib, right, against Iaquinta, where his coaches were just yelling at him, like, why are you standing and trading, trying to punch him? Like, and he was just like, all right, we'll go back to father's play it. Like, all right. But every wrestler seems to be just entranced with, oh, I have some success on the feet. Like, I just want to punch the dude. I don't want to wrestle. And it's been infuriating to watch, because there are guys like Adesanya where, again, Yoel Romero or Gastelum. If Gastelum had just gone real heavy on grappling early on, right, you wonder how that would have gone. I think Adesanya probably still takes it, but it'd be interesting. It'd be really interesting to see. And instead, we had Gastelum mostly just throw every single punch he could at him, and it was like, okay, and then go for the takedown at the worst possible time.
Right.
Because, good job, Kelvin. But yeah, it's crazy. But Vettori is the one person who just demonstrated against somebody who had a loud mouth, was talking a lot of trash, that he was willing to do the work in grappling. And I really feel like if you go for 17 takedowns in your last fight, you're not going to go for 2 the next time around. And, he went for 6 in the first Adesanya fight, but he kind of figured out, obviously, in the last round, that that's what you got to do. So I think he'll still be aggressive striking. I think he'll still, have some confidence on the feet, but I also feel like he's going to be looking for the opportunity to shoot anytime he can. And if he doesn't, well, then that's on him, because that's the game plan right there. You can't outstrike Adesanya. The only person to do that was Jan for a couple of rounds, but even then, by round 3, that's when Izzy kind of figured it out and took over, and that's when Jan switched to the grappling game, and rightfully so. So you gotta use the grappling. You have to.
Yeah, it's interesting too when you look at Vettori's win over Hermanson, because a guy who was actually dangerous on the ground in terms of throwing up submissions from maybe some weird positions, wasn't afraid to go down there with him, did just fine. So I think his confidence in grappling in particular is at an all-time high compared to that first fight, for sure.
Yeah, no, I mean, and I think he will go for submissions. I think he will try his hardest to get a finish over Adesanya, because that would just be a huge statement. And whether or not he gets it, I'm not sure. But yeah, I that's definitely the game plan. It's a grappler versus striker matchup. That's what it is. So let us know in the comments who you think is going to win this match. Do you think it will be Adesanya, like Drake says, or do you think it'll be Vettori, like I say? Let us know how you see the fight playing out. Anything we've brought up, make sure to let us know your reasoning as to why you're picking who you are picking. And if we've brought up anything that you disagree with, always feel free to tell us, even though we will probably just say you're wrong. Because, I mean, come on. But no, seriously, let us know any and all thoughts regarding this topic, make sure you hit the like button, subscribe, bell notification. And yeah, June 12th should be a good fight. I'm excited. Bobby Knuckles will get his chance. This is still a great fight. So